Hello, and welcome to the Daily Rings of Power podcast, your daily dose of the latest news, rumours, and speculation about the Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power. The day is Wednesday, August 17th, and I'm your host, Harry. I hope you're having a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world. Apologies for my absence yesterday, it's been a very busy week, but I do have a feeling you won't mind the wait, because joining me for today's episode is the delightful Lauren Does Cosplay. Not only is Lauren an incredible cosplayer who recently went to Comic-Con with her amazing Galadriel cosplay and got to meet the cast, she's also an absolute joy to talk to, and we had such fun in the upcoming conversation. We cover everything from how Lauren got into both Lord of the Rings and into cosplay, and what her experience at Comic-Con was like. We also talked about her thoughts on the show, advice for people who want to get into cosplay, and some amusing anecdotes along the way. As always, before we start, we must begin the episode with a reading from the professor's work. Today's reading was chosen by Lauren and comes from The Lord of the Rings, Book 4, The Stairs of Cirith Ungol. "Yes, that's so," said Sam, "and we shouldn't be here at all if we'd known more about it before we started, but I suppose it's often that way. The brave things in the old tales and songs, Mr. Frodo. Adventures, as I used to call them. I used to think they were things the wonderful folk of the stories went out and looked for, because they wanted them, because they were exciting and life was a bit dull, a kind of sport, as you might say. But that's not the way of it with the tales that really mattered, or the ones that stay in the mind. Folks seem to have been just landed in them, usually. Their paths were laid that way, as you put it, but I expect they had lots of chances. Like us, or turning back, only they didn't. And if they had, we shouldn't know, because they'd have been forgotten. We hear about those as just went on, and not all to a good end, mind you. At least not to what folk inside a story, and not outside it, call a good end. You know, coming home and finding things all right, though not quite the same. Like old Mr. Bilbo. But those aren't always the best tales to hear, though they may be the best tales to get landed in. I wonder what sort of tale we've fallen into." Thank you to Lauren for that beautiful passage. It's one of my favourites from the book, and it's fair to say Lauren has a tale or two to tell herself. But without any further delay, let's get into the conversation. I would like to welcome to the show a very exciting guest, the one, the only, Lauren Does Cosplay. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be a guest on your podcast.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on. As all my listeners should know, Lauren is in incredibly high demand, so
No.
difficult to,
Come on now. You're giving me too much credit.
I know. I thought I'd roll the pre-show joke into the actual episode. But yeah, so we're here today to talk to Lauren. For listeners who don't know, although I can't imagine any don't know, Lauren recently went to San Diego Comic-Con, where she took her beautiful Galadriel cosplay, got to meet Morfydd Clark, fever dream material there,
Literally.
I suspect.
Very much so. People are always ask me, like, what did you guys talk about? I'm like, I have no memory of, anything that I said, anything that she said to me, which is kind of a bummer, but I'm very much I don't know, when I get excited, I just kind of black out a little bit, and then it's I wish I remembered all the details and all the exciting bits of it, but I just kind of blacked out.
Listen, I think the fact of the matter is there are pictures with you and Morfydd, so it happened. Whether you remember it or not, it did.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. But before we dive into all that, and we're going to talk about everything from cosplay in general to that cosplay to Comic-Con, we start off, as every generic Tolkien podcast does, with a little intro question of how did you first get into Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, all of that?
Okay, yeah, I saw The Fellowship of the Ring when I was 8 years old. It came out in 2001, so I was 8. I had to wait till it was out on, I think I first watched it on a VHS tape, because didn't have DVDs yet. So yeah, I saw it as the movie, the first thing that I saw, and that was kind of it for me, when you just see something that you're just oh, it just kind of like blows your little kid mind. And so, I mean, I was still 8, so I wasn't like ready to dive into the books, you know? I don't even know if I knew that there was books. So yeah, so I watched the movies as they came out, and it was like every time I had to wait until they came. We got them on like VHS or DVD because I was too young to see them in theaters, which is like my greatest tragedy in life, that I never got the experience of seeing the Lord of the Rings movies in theaters. Just like if it ever came to my town in theaters, I would be there so fast. So yeah, I watched those when I was really young, and then I read the Lord of the Rings when I was in high school as like my summer. I was in like an AP reading, like an advanced reading course in high school, and so we had to read like a few books over the summer and like write to our teacher about them, and I read The Lord of the Rings for the first time and loved them. I think it was a little bit jarring, like to go from the movies to the books. It was a little bit like, ooh, a little bit slow here. It's just kind of like a different way to ingest the story. And then I read The Hobbit when that was like the first book. It was actually the only book that I took to college. Was I bought a copy of The Hobbit, and then from there I started like collecting editions of Tolkien books. And it's so funny, I like look back on this picture that I took when I went to college, and it was just like my one edition of The Hobbit that I had, and now I have like 50 some odd editions of The Hobbit on my bookshelf. So yeah, so I'm definitely like a little bit more of a movie gal. I still like love the books, but you know, I read the books every few years. I watch the movies like 10 times a year. So yeah.
I can completely relate to that, and funnily enough, we have a very similar origin story in that I watched the films when I was 7 years old, because that's when Fellowship came out for me. But my parents were very naughty, and I did go and see it in the cinema at 7 years old. And
lucky.
I know. But to be fair, in hindsight, I did then have several nightmares for months of the ring wraiths. So was it a good parenting decision?
Yeah. But you turned out fine, so it doesn't even matter.
Yeah. Here I am recording a podcast into my wardrobe. I mean, fundamentally.
I remember like when Two Towers came out in theaters, my mom went and saw it. My parents aren't particularly like nerdy people. It's like they just sort of saw it and that was it for them. But for me, it was like a whole life course after that. But I remember my mom went and saw the Two Towers in theaters, and when she got home I was like, tell me everything that happened, because like I didn't know the story, you know, I didn't know the books. My parents had never read the books or anything, so it was like, tell me everything. And I just have like a very distinct memory of her telling me about the Gollum and Smeagol scene where he's like talking to himself, and I was just like, I can't wait. And then I had to wait like a year or however long it takes for things to come out on DVD. So yeah.
Well, we've all been there, and then we've all had over the years, I guess, several long waits between those films, the Hobbit films, and then the Hobbit films to here. Yeah, and it's a long time. It's strange to finally be back in a place where we are now. 18 days or whatever it is out from the show.
So close. I know. I really had my moment when the Hobbit movies came out, because it's like unpopular opinion, but I like the Hobbit movies. Obviously, they're very different and they've got their own whole thing going on, but I think, they're fun in that way. Like, they're different. Yes. They're fun. I don't like comparing them to the Lord of the Rings, because it's like, obviously, it doesn't have the same tone. It doesn't have the same much of anything. So it's like I sort of just see them as their own little thing, and I like them, whatever. And so that was my because they came out when I was in college, and that was my time to really I went and saw them at the midnight premieres like every year that they came out. And so yeah, now we're another 10 years from that, and it's like the hype is uncontrollable.
I mean, this is getting spooky by the moment. I also was at university in the UK. I also watched the Hobbit films released kind of at midnight. I still remember the UK doesn't tend to do late night cinema openings, but we found one in our local town that did, and we were so confused about how to get into the cinema, we had to walk up an escalator backwards, so one that was coming down. It was It was a very
It was a
strange
whole
experience. Yeah, and then I had
memorable.
to go through the whole of the third film and then the tragic end of that film, and I was just it was 3 a.m. I was emotionally drained, and I just thought I need to see this when I'm not tired and haven't been stressed out.
I know, and they would always come out like during finals week for us because they came out in December, and it was like always like when your most stressful exams and stuff are. So it'd be like, I really should not be going to a movie theater at midnight and like watching a movie for 3 hours, but I'm doing it. This is my chance. I'm taking it.
Once in a lifetime. Once in a lifetime, so to say.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, moving on from your Tolkien origins story and into cosplay, which is really, what I'm so excited to talk to you about today. As someone who has, pretty much no experience beyond Halloween parties, as I'm sure
Right.
you'll have, how did you first get into cosplay? What was your kind of gateway into it?
I actually just like tweeted something about it the other day because I'm sort of like new to the cosplay scene actually, which is like I'm jealous of all the people that have been doing it for like 10, 12 years. They've been in this scene for a long time, but I didn't even know what cosplay was until 2016, 2017. Like I did not know that it was a thing. And I went to my first convention and like people were dressed up and I was like, oh my, like, adults in costume, not during Halloween. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And like I have a picture, and I took a picture because there was a bunch of people dressed in like as Lord of the Rings characters, like a Radagast and all the wizards, and I was just like, oh my god, this is so cool. And I was still in college at the time, or like had just gotten out of college, so I didn't have any money. I didn't, I'm just sort of scraping by on a job, so no time, no money to like really invest in this hobby. But we moved to Colorado in 2017 or 2018, and once I have like my own business, I make maps. Oh, they can't see, but I've got a map on my wall behind me.
We'll link it in the episode description for the
Okay.
visual aid.
I make like Tolkien style maps of like real world places. So yeah, I had like kind of a little bit of establishment, and that's when I started taking cosplay a little bit more seriously, I guess you could say, or just like actually investing in it as a hobby. Yeah, and I like I didn't make my cosplay Instagram page until like 2019, and it just kind of took off. I just like loved it so much, I love the process of making costumes. I've always been that girl that's like, Halloween is my favorite holiday, and I did like theater in high school, so dressing up and like being in costume has always been not like a big part of my life, but something that I've always really enjoyed. And so for this to all like come full circle, like this Lord of the Rings costume to be the one that like got this attention and has like gotten me these opportunities, like that's why I couldn't stop crying like at this thing that at San Diego Comic-Con when I got to like meet Morfydd and everything. It was like I could not stop crying, and everyone was like, are you okay? It's like, this is just like really a lot. This is a lot for me to handle.
Amazing. And before we dive into that specifically, because I know I've basically teased the listeners by being like, I'm going to get Lauren on to talk about the Galadriel cosplay, and now we're like 10 minutes in, I'm like, I'm still not going to talk about it.
We got
That's
time.
to keep them
time.
listening.
Yeah.
So you kind of got into cosplay, you're excited about it, you're starting making things. What was it about the Lord of the Rings that drew you to those costumes? Because I actually first came across your cosplays because of the amazing Thorin one from the Hobbit films, which is this beautiful blue robe. And I still remember when I first saw the picture of, I think you're kind of looking over your shoulder with the sword. Yeah. And it was one of those moments where I was like, hang on, was that a still from the film? And I was like, oh no, it's a cosplay.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you, because I didn't even do the beard and I got so much flack for it. But I was like, it's my cosplay. I can do whatever I want.
Whatever.
I know.
But then I've also seen that you've done cosplays of wood elves, you've done hobbits, you've done Arwen, you've done the Witch King, or should I say the Witch Queen, perhaps?
The Witch Queen.
Yeah. So what is it about these costumes, these designs, what is it about that aesthetic that draws you to it so much?
Oh, I think so much of it just is like the love of Lord of the Rings and wanting to cosplay from that and like meet other cosplayers that because it just means that, you know, you're meeting people that also love it. Because a lot of people ask, like, you know, if they are wanting to get into cosplay, they're like, where do I start? Like, what do I pick? And it's like, the most important advice, or like the best advice that I can give, is to just cosplay from something that you love, because it will make the costume come together so much more quickly, and like you'll have so much more fun doing it if it's from something that you already love, you know? So, yeah, and I think there's so much range in like Lord of the Rings costumes, because you can do a Hobbit, which can be a really easy outfit that you can just like thrift some trousers and a vest and a, you know, a shirt. Like, it can be very simple, but then there are like really intricate costumes like Thorin or like Eowyn's battle armor. Like, there's so much range of like difficulty for whatever you want to do. So it's like, if I just want to throw on something easy, I'll do like my little Hobbit cosplay. Or if I'm like, okay, I'm ready to take on a new big project, like there are so many fun ones. And like, because I'm a big like the appendices of the movies, like, you know, all the behind the scenes stuff, and just like the time and the creativity that the costume designers had when making all the costumes, it's just like, I want to be like you. You're so cool. You know, the people that like, they said that the people that made all the chainmail, they like wore their fingerprints off making it. And it's like, I started making chainmail a few years ago, and it's like, I kind of got to that point where I was like, damn, I think I'm getting to that level where I'm rubbing my fingerprints
calluses
off. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I just love that, like, and like the Tolkien cosplay community is so fun. It's just like, especially since it is like so old at this point, you know, 20 years since the Lord of the Rings movies came out. It's like, when you see it's kind of got this like timeless aspect of it. So like, if you're out at a convention now and you see a Lord of the Rings cosplayer, it's like, you got like the Spider-Man pointing at it. Yeah, it's just like, okay, you're my kind of people.
Amazing. And then, of course, you know, we go through, as we've already discussed, we go through several years where, okay, we've got the Lord of the Rings films, we've got the Hobbit films, but in terms of visual depictions of Middle-earth on screen, we're kind of left a little bit in the dark. And then I suppose we didn't really get anything till January, February of this year, right?
Yeah.
And then we got the Hands posters, but, you know, good luck cosplaying a hand, I guess. Although, I did see that you did one with your Thorin costume. Yes.
Because those posters dropped literally the day that I was doing my, like, Thorin photo shoot. So, like, they came out that morning, like, while I was getting ready, and I was like, oh my god, like, I have to recreate one of these pictures, you know, just for fun. And I ended up getting in kind of some like mild hot water about it, because people it got shared on like it was not like the official Lord of the Rings, because at the time I think it was just LOTR on Prime is like what everyone was calling it. And so there was a Facebook page that was sort of like impersonating like Lord of the Rings on Prime, and they posted my picture, like, of, you know, I like edit it with like the text and everything, and all the comments were like so mad, because, you know, it's clearly a Thorin cosplay, and everyone's like, what is Thorin doing? Like, what is this show? No. This show's ruining the lore if they're putting Thorin, which was like, you know, kind of a compliment that it was actually being mistaken as one of those posters. But I was like, I didn't even post this here. Like, whoever took this picture either didn't know that it was just a cosplay, or I don't know, they were trying to get me in trouble.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think you have to take it as a compliment, and it's kind of funny because you saying, you know, all these people going, it's breaking the law. It's like, oh, little did they know what else they were going to be doing at this time.
Right.
You know, their rage bottles had only just been uncorked.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really just the start of it.
Yeah, although I do kind of, before I get into the next bit, I do kind of hope that for future seasons when we get new characters, I kind of want them to do hands posts every year. I hated it at the time.
Them. You hated the hands posters?
Well, okay, when I say I hated them, because I was just sitting there like, you know, like one of those characters in CSI going, in hands, and I just, you know, driving myself insane.
All the analysis, I forgot how much it was like, who are these people? Like, everyone guessing who everyone was.
Yeah, but I do hope they do it in the future, because looking back on it, it was kind of fun. And,
it was so fun.
You know, and I think it's a nice thing as well, as you kind of did for future cosplays. People can do that, you know.
Yeah.
A really cool little aesthetic.
And even, like, I remember, you know, that day, and I saw the armor, which we now know was Galadriel, and I was like, I'm sure if I, like, went back and found a tweet, because I was like, I think I said something like, can I make this based off of this picture? And that was just like the hands poster. I was like, I'm making this. Is it enough to make this full costume? And then luckily we got, that half up shot of her like
yes.
a couple weeks later, and it was like, okay, that's definitely enough to start.
I was going to say, because I feel like I went back and checked because I thought I'd imagined it. I thought there's no way Lauren could have started so quickly after, but I think you first posted about doing it literally maybe a day or two after the Vanity Fair article dropped.
Very quickly, yeah. Yeah, because I don't know when the hands pictures dropped, but the picture of the Vanity Fair one of Morfydd in Galadriel in the armor dropped on like February 15th or something, and it was like the next day I was like sourcing materials and like getting stuff in because I knew that I was going to make it.
And what was it about? Because I know you've kind of not specialized, but you've done some amazing armor builds in the past and carry on doing them. Was it the armor that drew it to you? Was it Galadriel? What was it about that picture that made you just want to do it?
It was all of it.
All of it.
I mean, if anyone like follows me, I'm very much like a women in armor is sort of my thing. I have like a steel armor suit or pieces that I've compiled over the years, and I do a lot of like lady night type photo shoots and stuff, so like seeing Galadriel having an armor moment, and it's so beautiful, like that whole picture, I was just like immediately yes. Like no hesitation. And that's a very like common thing with cosplayers. It's like you'll maybe be like, what's my next project gonna be? I don't really know. And then you'll see something that you're just like, I have to have it. Gotta make that. And that was one for me that it was just like, I'm absolutely making this. I don't care if I don't have all the pictures. And I used that one picture for months, like until they released a picture of like the bottom half. But that was like the one picture that I went off of.
I mean, that's amazing. And I feel like, now, you might have to remind me when exactly you finish it, but I seem to remember it was only a few weeks before Comic-Con, wasn't it? Or maybe a month?
Yeah. Oh, no, yeah, like the week of leaving. I was
really?
like finishing it, yeah. Because I had been, my whole plan when I was making it was that I was going to wear it to Dragon Con, which is a big convention in Atlanta that's in, it's actually on the weekend that the show premieres. So I was like, oh, it'll be perfect. Like, I'll make it and wear it for like the premiere weekend. And then we were coming up on my local convention, which is in Denver, Colorado. And I was like really close to done. And I was like, oh, I think I can get it done before Denver Con. But it's definitely going to be like a bit more of a push, because otherwise I would have had like another month or two. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I just like really busted it out because I had like the whole legs to do still. So that's what I was working on. And I got it done for my convention. And I actually had a horrible con experience that day.
Oh, no.
Which is like so funny that it like spiraled into this whole like series of events, because I tried to wear it to my Denver convention, and it was like immediately it was like falling apart. I had like rivets breaking and like pieces popping off, and I was just like crushed over it. Like I couldn't even get out of the parking lot. Like it was really awful, and I was just like in shambles about it all day. I was like crying, and I had brought Thorin as a backup, which I didn't really want to wear because it was really, really hot for that convention, and it's like my hottest, heaviest costume, but I was like, okay, whatever. So I changed into Thorin, and I just like was miserable. So I came back and I was like, okay, let me just put Galadriel back on, and I just won't wear the legs, because that was like where all of my problems were coming from. So went back to the car and I changed back into it, and it was like a whole piece on like the side of the breastplate like cracked almost all the way off. It was just like, oh my god, it was such a nightmare. And I didn't get a single picture in it, and it was like I had all these like paint wearing off issues and attachments breaking, and I left that day like sobbing, because I was just like so down on myself, like I'm a terrible cosplayer. I can't even like make something that's wearable. I was just like really, really upset about it. And for like the whole next day too, I was like, I'm just gonna throw it in the trash. Like, I did such a bad job on this. And then that Monday, so this was like, I went on Saturday, cried all day Sunday, and then Monday I was like, okay. And I like didn't even bring it out of the car because I couldn't bear the sight of it because it was so damaged, and like I knew I had to fix so many things on it. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna get it out, I'm gonna put it on, and I'm just gonna get a photo in it because just to make it feel like it was worth it, you know, to make this costume. And that was the picture that I took that like blew up, and I like posted it on like Reddit and Twitter. I like posted it on all my socials, and it like totally took off, and the OneRing.net saw it, and they are the ones that like invited me to San Diego Comic-Con. So I'm just so glad that I put it back on.
It's a good lesson, I think, for everyone listening, that no matter how bad it gets, just do the thing. Do the thing no matter if it is.
Yeah. And I just like am so thankful that I was just like, I'm just gonna take a picture in it, and then I'll put it in retirement, and then I did not put it in retirement.
Well, I mean, you see, it's funny the way the winds of fate move, and clearly it was meant to be, because I do remember you posting it on Twitter, and then I remember retweeting it, being like, this is amazing. And then I remember your daily Twitter campaigns to get the Lord of the Rings on Prime account to notice.
I just wanted them to like it. That's all I wanted, was just like, please just see it. I'd be so happy.
And then look what you did. I mean, so I think we should dive into the Comic-Con part. So obviously, as you said, the OneRing.net invites you along. Very cool. You get there, of course. And was the first thing you had the Hall H, or talk us through your experience at Comic-Con?
Yeah, so, well, actually, the week before, it was, like, the next most exciting thing that happened was that Amazon reached out, or, you know, Prime Video, sorry.
Yes.
reached out for me to, like, make the sword and I was, like, already planning on making it, but they were like, you know, if you'll make a video, and so that was, like, the coolest thing ever, that I got to collaborate with them and make the sword. Comic-Con started. Wednesday was sort of just like getting there, getting badges. Thursday was a lot of like waiting in line for Hall H, because it was a whole ordeal to get into it. And then Friday morning was actually Hall H, and that was like so cool. I've gone to like panels at conventions before, but this one was like, holy
potatoes.
This is crazy. It's like this huge room, and we went in, and there was sort of like black curtains around the whole room, and just sort of like a big screen above the stage in the front. And like the first thing that happened was like this big, like there's a ring on the screen, and it's rotating, and it like kind of explodes, and like the explosion sort of like pushes back all of the curtains, and like the whole room was screens, like almost completely wrapped around, with like footage playing on all sides of it, and none of it was the same. So it's like everyone in the room is like whipping their heads around, like trying to see everything that's happening, because it was like, you know, footage that no one had seen. So it was like, oh my god, I can't see it all. And then they brought out Bear McCreary and the orchestra, which was like, I mean, when I tell you, me and my friends were freaking out. I was sitting next to Don Marshall and Annex and Anna Maria, and we were just like, oh my god. It's like losing our minds. And then they're like, and ladies and gentlemen, your host, Stephen Colbert. And we were just like, what is happening? Like, it was just a lot. It was a lot in a very short amount of time. But yeah, it was just so cool to like hear the showrunners talk, because this was sort of the first time we've really heard any of them like talk. So it was just like, okay, let's see what these people have to say, you know. And I mean, I've been excited about this show from like the second that I heard it was happening. But to actually hear the showrunners speak, and they're just so clearly passionate about Tolkien, and it was just exciting to hear them talk about it and hear the actors talk for the first time, because everything has been so hush-hush for so long. So it was like, that was our first moment of like, oh my god, these people are like so excited, and they're just big nerds. And yes, that was really cool.
Yeah. And so then, I mean, I'm sure I could ask you a million questions about Hall H, but it's one of those things where I'm like, I will be here all day.
They did upload it onto YouTube.
Oh, don't worry. Don't worry.
I figured you'd seen, but
no, I just my time spent daily tweeting about this show. It's just kind of like it's just at this point it's just time I can't get back. So I had someone message me the other day and was like, you started your Twitter account in like early June, and they were like, I know you've called your account Daily Rings of Power, but you have like taken a day off from tweeting, right? And I was like, nope. Not yet.
I mean, so much stuff has been coming out recently, too. It's like, whoa, we're getting a lot.
Yesterday, I was just trying to go to sleep, and it was just like, and another teaser, and you get a teaser.
Right. They were really on one yesterday.
I know. But returning to Comic-Con, so we have the Hall H panel, and then is it later that day you got to meet the cast and Morfydd, or was it the day after?
Yeah, Friday was a day, let me tell you. So yeah, we had done the whole Hall H thing in the morning, and that was like till about noon, and there was like, I mean, we were in line at like 7 o'clock in the morning until noon, so like none of us had eaten breakfast or anything, so it was like, it ended and we were like, okay, we're starving.
Yep.
And Dawn was like, oh, well, Amazon's got like a little buffet and like some food for us at the hotel if you want to just like come and we can do that. And I was like, okay, great. So we go and we're eating, and I kind of just had this like kind of crazy moment that I haven't really talked about online, but so I was up on this like rooftop, setting that they had, and there was a bar. So I was like, I was like talking with a friend, and I was like, dude, let's go grab a drink. So we go to the bar, and the bartender's like, what is this event over here? Like, because the Amazon thing was like its own little section, and we were like, oh, this is Amazon. They're promoting their new show for Comic-Con. So there's just like some creators here talking about it and whatever. And there was a guy sitting at the bar. And he was like, oh, you guys are here with this? And we were like, yeah. And he said, oh, I'm sort of like I can't remember what he said his title was, but he was like sort of in charge of the costumes that were there because they had them all on display, So he was like, I'm sort of in charge of, making sure that those are all good. And I was like, oh, how cool, And he was like, well, what are you doing here? Or he didn't say it like that, but, he was like, what are you doing?
Who are you?
Oh, what are you doing here? And I was like, oh, I'm a cosplayer. I made Galadriel's armor. And he was like, oh, well, let's see it then. And I was like, okay, So I like got on my phone and I showed him a picture, and he was just like actually very impressed. And he was like, you made this? And I was like, yeah. He was like, this looks incredible. And he goes, I made that armor for the show. And I was like, oh, well, isn't that a coincidence? And he goes, how did you do the chainmail for it? And I was like, oh, I got like a butcher's apron, and I just sort of like pieced it apart for what I needed. And he said, that's exactly what we did. I was just like,
wow,
like in pure euphoric bliss and he's like telling me how they made the armor, and I'm like telling him how I made mine, and that was just like, a little random, like totally coincidental thing that happened. That it was just like one of the coolest things that happened to like get to talk to the guys that made the armor on the show.
I was gonna say, you could almost think that if nothing else had happened to you that weekend,
it would have been so cool.
that would have already been an ascendant moment.
I know, and I thought that was gonna be like I was like, that was like the coolest thing ever that we just got to talk to those guys. And then like immediately after, we went to the party, and like that was a whole
and that was a whole
thing.
Well, you've just reminded me that I remember, because I was not at Comic-Con. I was in sunny England, which actually it's been very sunny lately. So before any listeners make a joke, we've had a heat wave.
Yeah, you guys we were probably like actually melting.
Yeah, we had rain for the first time in 2 months yesterday, and I was very tempted to dance in it, but
sounds nice.
I thought it's a bit sad when you're on your own. Anyway, right. I digress. I massively digress. But I was obviously live tweeting Comic-Con, and I don't think I ate for 8 hours because I was just glued to my laptop trying to retweet things. But I was watching the Q&As, and I was live tweeting them. And as I was watching the panel which Morfydd was on, and one of the questions from Patton Oswalt was, talk to us about this armor. We've seen you're in armor. That must have been amazing to wear. How hard was that to make? And he said, Comic-Con, I bet there's people dressed in it. And Morfydd said, actually, we talked, me and Kate Hawley, the costume designer, and Kate Hawley specifically said, yeah, we want to make it hard for someone to copy. I don't know, I think you have heard that before, but I mean, what a compliment for you then to go with it after they'd said, oh yeah, let's see them make this one.
Oh, well, and she even, because, like, I have, like, talked a little bit with Morfydd on Instagram, like, she, you know, she, like,
as you do.
It just, like, very brief, like, because she, like, shared my TikTok, which
Hang on,
was
let
really
me,
cool.
Sorry, Lauren, let me just pick that name up off the floor you dropped. There you go.
Okay. We are talking about her, all right.
I know. I'm sorry.
But, like, I had just been like, oh, you know, I was just like, oh my god, thank you for sharing my thing, and she was like, it took 50 people a year to make mine, so, like, this is really impressive, and I was just like, oh my god. And then in that clip, like, because I've seen that clip, and she says something like, you know, when I saw this person make this armor, I knew it was really a feat, or, you know, whatever she says.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my god, this is crazy. So yeah, we were like on that rooftop thing, and then, you know, after like divulging in a few too many drinks and like talking to those guys for too long, I was like, oh my god, I have to like go get ready. I have to like go to my hotel and get ready like as fast as humanly possible, because it was going to be another walk to get to the party. And I'm like, I kind of was just in my base layers, and then I had a big bag, and I'm like carrying my sword on my shoulder and my breastplate in my hand, and I've got my big bag full of armor, and I'm like walking to this event, and I get there, and I'm like covered in sweat because it was hot, and I'm like, you know, it was a whole thing when you're wearing a wig and everything.
Sure.
And so I changed and kind of made my entrance into the party, and, you know, immediately people were just like, oh my god, like asking for pictures and stuff, and which is just like, I can't stress enough how much I am not really used to that. Like, almost, you know, predominantly my experience as a creator online and like a costumer, like I make a costume and I make some TikToks and I do a photo shoot, and then I kind of just like move on to the next project, you know, like that's kind of the extent of what it always has been. So to like be in this setting where people are like, you know, appreciating something that I've made, I'm just like, don't look at me.
Don't see me.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, it's not that good, please don't look, you know. So I like was kind of just like mingling, getting onto the floor a little bit, and I didn't know this until afterwards, which I'm kind of glad, but there was like a group of 3 people, and they were just talking to me about it, and I was like, I don't even know, talking to them, and he's like, oh, can I get a picture? And I was like, yeah. So he's like taking a picture, and then when I got home from Comic-Con, that guy like found my Instagram and like had sent me the pictures, and he was like the CEO of marketing at Amazon, and I was like,
wow,
oh, I'm glad I didn't know that when I was talking to you, because it's so stressful.
I know, it's just that's the kind of thing I think must be, and you were kind of touching on this, and it was something I was going to ask you about later. It must be strange, you know, especially in the world of online content creation, right, where most of your interactions are through comments, or maybe you're engaging with other creators, whether it's, you know, on streams, podcasts, whatever it is, just messaging people. And then to go from that to, you know, being in the scary real world, you know, where all us online introverts try to avoid.
Yeah.
And have that experience, that must be an incredibly, both very rewarding, but also I imagine quite overwhelming.
Very overwhelming, and just like the whole setting was just like, you know, I'm a fan first and foremost, so it was just like, you're in this setting and it's all decorated and there's like costumes, and it was just like, I'm just sitting here like, oh my god, this is the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. And then people are like, you know, when the attention is on you and you're like, I'm just here trying to freak out, you know, like I can't handle also being like part of, you know, the event in the way that's like people are also sort of like gawking at what I've made, and it's like, no, look at all this, don't look at me, you know. And like when I sort of, there was like some stairs down in like the big open area, and like the Galadriel costume is sort of the one that was like front and center. And I walked up to it and just like immediately started crying, like could not keep it together. I'm just like kind of a very emotional person in general, so like I'm a crier. But I was just like so emotional seeing it, like getting to see it up close and it, you know, it's not the exact, it's kind of like her underlayers, but just seeing like any part of it was just like, oh my god, this is so emotional. Like I've been working on this costume for so long, and to like see it in person was just like so special. And then, but then immediately there's like big cameras that are like filming me, and I'm like, oh, I'm just like crying, and they're like, how does it feel? And I'm like, I don't know, I'm just like really emotional right now.
It feels a lot.
It's literally, I think I said that a lot, just like, I am just like, this is all a lot for me right now. And then they were like, oh, well, we've got like, there was like sort of an upstairs section that they were like, oh, we're sort of like bringing the content creator people, we're just kind of like hanging out up there. So I was like, okay, I could use a little bit of a break, Oh, I forgot to mention, when I first got there was like a security guy that checked my sword to make sure that it was safe. And he was like, okay, you're all good to go. So I go in with it. And then I was only like I had maybe been there for like 5 minutes. And there was another security guy that came up to me, and he was like, we need to like check your sword and tag it or something. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, someone did check it, but like, I'm not here to be a problem. Yes. So he's like, we need to go outside. And I was like, okay. So I'm like hobbling out my little Tin Man walk, like following him, and he's like checking it. And I was like, it's just 3D printed. I was like, honestly, there's more of a chance of it like falling apart in your hands right now than me actually using it to hurt anyone. And he was like, it's got a sharp point on it, so I'm gonna have to confiscate it for the party. And I was like, okay, like, I am not here to be a problem. So do whatever you gotta do. I don't
actually need to stab anyone today.
Yeah,
so.
I was like, it's all good. And he was like, I'm really sorry. And I was like, it's really. I was like, I actually did. I like made it for Amazon, but like, listen, you gotta do your job. So like, whatever, that's fine.
Yeah.
So he took it. And so cut to, we're up in this like upper section, and it was just sort of like, Dawn and Annex and I just kind of like all hanging out. And then this woman comes up, and she sort of grabs me, and she's like, you're coming with me. And I was like, okay. And she's like, really, we're on a mission. She's like pulling me through, and she's like, where's the sword? And I was like, I don't know, a security guy took it. And she's like on her little headpiece, and she's like, somebody locate the sword. We need the sword. And I was like,
oh my God.
I was like, and I was literally just like, what are we doing? She's like pulling me through this party, and like, I can barely get up and down the stairs. I'm like hobbling after her, and she's like, we're going. And I was like, I am coming. Like, I don't know what we're doing.
She's having a Jason Bourne moment. Meanwhile, you are just, trying to get through it.
I'm like, I don't know what's happening. So we like go all the way back through the party to like this door that was at the front, and there's like security guys standing outside of it, and there's like a bunch of people standing around, and they're all kind of just like looking at me like little shifty smiles, and I'm like, I'm still crying because this is all a lot, and I'm like, okay, should I be mentally preparing for something? Like, what's happening? This is feeling like a little bit of a lot right now. And so they're like making sure that I'm all put together, and the security guy, he's on his earpiece, and he's like, okay, she's excited, she's ready. And I was like,
she's excited.
I
love
like,
that.
what does that mean? So the girl that was with me, she's like, are you ready? And I was like, I guess so. Like, I don't know what this is. And so they open the door, and it's Morfydd standing there, like, like looking at me all excited, and I was just like, oh my God, this is like when the blackout fade starts a little bit. So I like go into the room, and we like hug, and I really don't remember much of what we talked about. I remember she asked how I made it, which is like, I wish that I had sort of workshopped a fast answer, because she's like, how'd you make it? And it's like, oh, I made it out of foam, and then I used like foam clay to sculpt over it, and then I used this material called Warblood to like thermocap. It's like, it's not a short
She was
answer.
there just like, was it difficult? And you were like, hang on, I actually have a 20-step process.
I think I really only remember, like, I talked about how I made it for too long. When the voice in the back of your head is like, shut up.
I like to imagine it as like, being on a first date, and someone's like, oh, how's your day been? And you give them a rundown of like 9 a.m. till then.
Yeah, that's what I was doing, and I was like, I need to stop. And what was so like jarring for me was that there was so many people in the room. There was like, it's her and I talking, but like to the side, there's like 40 people just like standing and watching. There's people with cameras. There's people with like big video cameras. And I'm like, there was like sort of a point where I turned, and I was like, are we like doing something in here, you know, because there's all these people just like, and she's like, no, I just wanted to meet you and I just wanted to talk. And I was like, okay, this is very weird. Just
the
to
thing
have, like...
that is happening is
yeah, but it was like, I'm sure that you're used to this, but like having 40 people just like stand and listen to us have a conversation is like so odd to me.
Well, I'm sure as well, you know, something I was talking to someone about the other day was obviously the production took place during COVID. Even if it hadn't, Amazon had, you know, the world's most draconian NDAs anyway. Yeah. Then we came out of a pandemic. Then they were kind of doing this very subtle marketing campaign for a long time. And this was really the first time any of the cast got to, you know, I've as I said, I've listened to way too many interviews. But, you know, the overall thing I've heard from Comic-Con was that they just... You know, I've heard that several of them cried when they saw the audience reaction in Hall H, and I think, you know, obviously it was a huge deal for you, but I'm sure as well for them it was kind of like, wow, we have put 2 years of our life into this, and now we're getting to see people who are not only excited, but are so excited they made replicas of our costumes, they travelled halfway around the world to be here, so, you know, I'm sure for Morfydd and the rest of the cast there was equal excitement back at you.
I think so. And, you know, and like you said, it's like so much of, you know, they spent 2 years making it, and then how tight-lipped they've had to be on everything. It's like so much of it is like they've only been seeing like the internet backlash. And that sucks to like, they're just receiving this onslaught of hate and they can't really say anything. They can't really respond to anything. They just have to like sit and take it, and which I'm sure has made them like a very tight-knit group because they're like the only people that can talk about it with each other. But I think them getting to like see people be excited about it in real life was really, really impactful for them. And so it was just like so cool to get to like, I don't know, see her and her just like asking me about it. And I'm like, I'm talking to Galadriel right now. That's crazy. Like, it felt like the equivalent of like if I had met like Kate Blanchett 20 years ago, you know, as like a fan, if I had made like a Galadriel costume. It's like, I feel like I've had that moment, and it's just like,
I was going to say,
bonkers.
I feel like, I feel like when you grew up with these films in your childhood, you kind of, obviously it was great to see them as a child, and I talked to people who, you know, weren't born or were too young to see the films at the time, and they were saying, oh, you know, I wish I'd been old enough, or I wish I'd been around. But equally, I think if you grow up with them as a child, you kind of, obviously you weren't talking to people about them because, you know, you weren't on, I mean, there weren't really many online communities beyond like old-style forums. But there wasn't social media as there is now. And God, I'm making myself sound so old.
No, you're so right though. Like I went through all of high school just being like, I'm the Lord of the Rings nerd, and everyone was like, okay. You know, I didn't have an online community or anything.
It's really funny, actually, because I've been doing this podcast for about 3 weeks now, and I've been doing the Twitter account for about 3 months, and I haven't really been telling anyone about it in the outside world, because, you know, it's kind of like that thing where it's personal, and you're like, people are going to judge you. And then I went to a wedding in Ireland last week, and I have a very supportive friend, I should give a shout out to him, Jimmy, who actually encouraged me to do the podcast, and it was his wedding, and I didn't know anyone there. It was a wedding in Ireland, and he would literally go around introducing to people, saying, this is Harry, he's got a podcast, and I'd be like, no, I don't. Yeah. But it was one of those great things that then as soon as I started talking to people were like, oh yeah, I love the Lord of the Rings films. And they're like, is there a show coming out? And I was like, yes! Let me tell you about it.
Oh my gosh, that's the best feeling when like you can just kind of creep into the conversation and be like, would you like to know more? Because say when and say stop when you want me to be done. I love supportive friends like that, though. That's so sweet.
No, because when you have these conversations, they're like, oh yeah, I like Lord of the Rings. And you're like, okay, so in the beginning, there was Eru, the one, and he created the world through song. And they're like, hang on, are we talking about the same thing?
Right. Oh, yeah, it can get too much fast for the normies.
Yes. But returning to Comic-Con briefly, because people who follow me on Twitter and know me know that I am a massive fan of Charles Edwards, massive fan of Celebrimbor, and there is a picture of you where you're, I think during the signing, where you're meeting him and he's examining the armor. Yeah. I don't know if you remember any of that conversation, but just for my soul, you know, anything you remember. Yeah,
well, she had she had signed, you know, when I was meeting Morfydd, signed my bracer, which was like really cool. So he, when I was like meeting the cast, they had like the whole cast lined up on this table and they were signing posters. So I got to like have a little brief interaction with everyone. And he was like, because I was like the last person in line, so I'm like waiting and they were, and so everyone who had gone before me was like, you know, through, and it was him and I don't remember the actor who's playing Gil-galad.
Benjamin Walker.
Yes, so it was like them on the end, and they were both just like staring at me, and I was like, I was just looking at them because they were like the first two that I was gonna go up to, and then I go up to the table, and they were both like, you know, arms outstretched, and they were like, look at you, and I was like, look at me, you. I remember doing that. I was like, you, what are you talking about? And they were just like, this looks amazing, like you've done, you know, such a good job. And they're like, you made this? And I was like, yeah, I made it. And he was like, Charles Edwards was like, can I touch it? Like, can I feel it? I was like, yeah. And like, he was like looking at the bracer that Morfydd had signed, and he was just, I don't know, he was just like impressed, and which is cool.
Don't worry, that is enough chicken soup for my Charles Edwards heart. That is, you know, that has warmed my day. But but it has reminded me as well, something I was going to say and ask you about was, I think everyone in the fandom has had this impression through all the interviews, through Comic-Con, you know, this is a cast that isn't treating this just like a job. A lot of them were already in love with this world. I mean, you know, not to bring it back to Charles Edwards. I'm sorry, everyone listening. I'll stop talking about him. But, you know, he talked about when being a child writing Lord of the Rings plays himself, trying to copy Tolkien's Elvish handwriting.
It's so cute. I could cry.
I know. But it seems like a lot of them already were or have become just huge fans of it. From your impression of meeting the cast, how did that come across to you?
Oh, it totally came through. Like, I've said to people, you know, since then, like, you know, the people who are haters, who think that they're all just, like, don't even like Tolkien or whatever. And I'm like, from talking to them and hearing them talk, and, like, the showrunners and everything, like, it just feels like me. You know, when I hear the showrunners talk, it feels like if someone gave me $1 billion to make a show, and they were like, don't potatoes up. But yeah, that's like what it feels like. It's just like, you're a big fan, here's the money, don't mess this one up. And like, I can't even fathom the pressure that comes with, you know. And I think Morfydd did an interview where she was saying that, like, she used to pretend to be Galadriel and stuff, and it's like, I could cry. Like, this is us, you know? It's literally just us if we were actors and we got this opportunity to be... I can't even imagine what it would be like to be... Because Morfydd is close to our age, you know? She was... I think she said she was 7 as well when Fellowship of the Ring came out, and it's like... If this was happening to me, if it was like, you get to be... you know, this next phase of Galadriel, like, I would pass out. I can't even imagine like what that would feel like. So I just feel I have such a strong sense of like, I'm so excited for them. Like, I know I don't know them, like I don't have like a personal relationship with any of them, but I'm just so excited for them. Like, I just wish them the best. I hope that the show is amazing, and that they get to have this experience like the original Fellowship did, and just like, you know, they are so bonded together, and I'm just so excited for them. I don't know.
Me too. No, so am I, and I think that's one of the things that made me happiest about seeing them all at Comic-Con, and the fact that, you know, they had these parties where they can meet content creators and then fans. I think is that like you said, my biggest worry has been there's a lot of and we're not going to spend a lot of time on them because they don't deserve it, but there have been a lot of very loud voices from a small minority of very hateful people, and that often drowns out the good stuff. And I know a lot of the actors, therefore, aren't on social media. I applaud them. If I wasn't obsessed, I also wouldn't be on social media. I have a terminally online brain. That's my own problem. I know, exactly. This is my problem. But so I often think, you know, I really hope they get a sense, and so a couple of writers are on, and a couple of the actors are on, And, like, I do my small thing, which is whenever they post something, I always just leave a comment like, this looks great, hope you know how much we're all excited. Because it's just like, you just want them to feel like that there are so many people rooting for them as well, because it must be hard. And, so I think it's great. And like you say, they do seem like real fans. But also, I kind of have this thing where sometimes fans say, like, oh, they're not, they don't really know Tolkien or things like that. And I'm always like, even if they didn't, it's also a job for them. Yeah. So maybe just, take a step back, realize these are people with careers, and this will be their career for a couple of years, maybe. Yeah. But
and they don't have to be lore experts to get a role, do the deep dive on, their character in the world and whatever. Like, I don't know. Just it's a little bit pretentious to be like, they don't know everything there is to know. It's like, shut up, they're actors. Like, they're there to do a job. But yeah, when I was like meeting all of them, it's, it's a very, you got about 10 seconds to talk to everyone. So I very much made it a point to, if I had a little, 2 or 3 of them, just like, I just kept saying, I hope you know how many people are excited for this. Like, I can't imagine, what you've been dealing with online, and I can't even like fathom that scope of hate that you've been receiving, but there are so many people that are like foaming at the mouth excited for this show to come out. So and I just remember I just kept saying that. I was just like, there are so many people so excited for this, and I just hope you know that. I only got 5 seconds to talk to you, but like, it's not just me.
No, and I think that's the great thing now that they had their first premiere in LA last night, and I know they've got some around the world, and from what I've heard, they're going to do the big one in London, I think, which will be great. Mm-hmm. I'm funnily enough, I'm moving out of London 2 weeks before, but I'll probably get a train down and just bang at the window outside, screaming, "Let me in!" Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's fantastic. I think it's only upwards from here. One of the things I wanted to actually talk to you about was, obviously you've done the Galadriel cosplay. I know you've said you're working on one of her other ones, her more kind of, I think it's the armor she's wearing in kind of Frozen North, the more kind of lightweight chainmail based one. Are there any other costumes you've seen so far or ideas you've got of what you'd like to do?
Oh my god, I would make every costume from this show. Everything looks so good. It's really a question of like, how do I stop myself from doing everything? I'm really in love with Tower Miriel's like scale breastplate.
Yes.
Obsessed with it. And the day that they released that picture, I tweeted, I was like, please somebody stop me from making this. And then that was like before this thing. And so when I was like talking to her, she was like, make mine next. And I was like, I will. Don't you tempt me, because I will. So I love the look of that one. All of Galadriel's, like even just her casual dresses with the robes are so beautiful. But I'm much less sewing inclined. I just like lean towards sewn projects a little bit less. So I'm like, okay, I'll let other people do those ones. They're stunning, they're beautiful, but like not really for me to make. I love making armor and stuff. So yeah, I don't know, maybe Tower Miriel's. I even love like all of the men's armor. So cool.
I was gonna say, that's the thing. There's so many opportunities, and you've done some wonderful ones like Thorin's and the Witch King. So there's so many opportunities as well. And I think even with Galadriel at this point, we've had the one you made. We've got this lightweight one that you're working on, and then also yesterday we got a new picture of her more ceremonial.
I know. Yes. I'm trying not to. I'm really trying not to.
I mean, that's a whole thing as well. You've got the white cloak. You've got the leaf dated. Yes. I mean,
the bummer about it is that it's a different breastplate, which just kills me, because if all I had to do was like make, like those like big shoulder editions, like easy peasy. But the fact that it's like a whole other breastplate, I'm like, I think
even like the arm pieces, and like there's a kind of different design around the kind of lower half. So maybe during the off season when you're looking for things to do,
right?
Yeah. And kind of moving away from cosplay, just because obviously we've talked about the cosplay element, but just more in general, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the show. What are you most excited about? What from what you've seen are you most excited about? Which characters? Anything you'd like to talk about?
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited for all of it, because I I'll be the first one to tell everyone I am not a lore girl yet. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what happens, you know? Okay. I mean, I sort of, like, have, like, the grand... You know, I know that there's some battles, and obviously everything falls to potatoes because of what we see in the Third Age, but, like, I don't know the story of the Second Age yet. I know what happens to Numenor. I know, you know, there are just, like, bits and pieces that I've...
Yes.
You know, it's like, okay, I know that this will happen, but I'm so excited to see it come about and, like, how they're going to tell the story, how they're going to merge... these, like, really large spans of time to make it, like, a cohesive story. I'm just, excited to see Middle-earth in a new perspective. Like, obviously, we all love Peter Jackson's Middle-earth so much, and it's got a very distinct tone and a vibe, and we love. But to get to see, like, a different version of it in a different time, with different cultures, it's like, it's just going to be eye candy and brain explosions for all of the weeks that it's coming out, because it's like, I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't know what we're going to see, and I'm just, like, so excited for all of it.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think as well, one of the things I've noticed, and somehow I've managed to bring it back to costume design as well, but this also kind of wraps into set design and casting, everything. We're seeing a much broader part of the world, both in the sense that, you know, I think in a very positive sense, we're seeing more diverse casting, more broader array of characters, better roles, both for women and characters of color, so I think that's great. But also in terms of the cultural influences we're seeing into the set design, the costume design. You know, when you look at, I think some of the Linden outfits of the elves, you're kind of almost like Rome at its height, and then you've got Numenor, which is like Great Byzantine, almost aesthetic. And I feel like both the people like you, fan artists, just fans in general, there's almost this broadening perspective. It's like, you know, we love the Peter Jackson world, but it's almost like looking through a certain lens, and the lens just got wider and wider and wider, and now it's on the horizon. Yeah,
I know, it's just, like, so close. I just cannot wait. And I have so much hope and excitement for it, but you know, it could be a flop, which would be such a bummer, but, like, I'm more than willing to be like, you know, it just didn't really hit the mark for me. But, like, I feel like going into it with, like, optimism and just, like, not being, like, just not hating it out the gate is always, like, a good... And I get it, like, people don't want to, you know, get their hopes up and then, you know, be really let down. But it's like, well, you're certainly not even giving it a chance if you're, like, expecting to hate it going in, so, like...
And I think as well, there's a difference between having high expectations and which can then let you down. And to be fair, it's too late for me. My brain is broken. My expectations are already through the roof. There's nothing saving me here. But I think for more normal people, it's less about having high expectations. It's just going with some cautious optimism. Like, look at what you've seen, say, okay, maybe I'm not sure about this, I'm not sure about that, but there's a lot of stuff there that I would challenge anyone to say, oh, that doesn't look high quality, or doesn't look like a lot of time and energy's gone into it.
That's my least favorite criticism, is like, come on. Like, people, like the kind of comments where people, it's like this beautiful still shot, and someone's like, this show looks like it was made for $30. It's like, you can't even get a lace front wig for less than $100. Like, it's just so... like,
I know.
I can't even, like, stand that kind of criticism, because it's like, you're so undermining every person that has, like, poured in years of work and creativity and energy into, like, making this look as good as they possibly can, just for you to type, like, looks like it was made for a nickel. It's like, potatoes off. I can't handle it. So annoying.
I know. And also, you've just reminded me, when Miriel's costume came out with the beautiful gold armor, there were immediately people going, what's that? I can see there's a wrinkle on the shirt underneath her armor. Did they just get her to wear a shirt? And everyone was like, no, it's probably like a leather shirt, because, you know, you have to be able to move in things.
You can't just, like, be encased. You have to have some mobility in your shoulders, you idiots!
I know. I feel like we almost... In fact, maybe that's your next project, is to, you know, explain to people like they're 5 the realities of wearing armor.
Yeah, they're so, like, unwilling. You could say anything. You could explain to them, you know, every minute detail of, like, what goes into it. And they'll just be like, stupid, doesn't follow the lore, women are awful. You're like, okay.
I know.
Never mind.
It's one of those things.
Yeah.
You just... I had this today. I was talking with some friends in the group chat, and I was getting really kind of wound up about something. They said, Harry, you're always the one telling us to ignore it, focus on positive. I was like, you're right. I'm having Twitter brain at the moment. I need to move on.
I know, that's what my husband is always like. Just don't, like, look at all of that negativity. I'm like, I'm not even trying to. It's just, like, you can't even look on anyone's post or anything about the show without just seeing, like, the most brain-dead comments you've ever seen. And it's just, like, I can't even, like, look at comment sections anymore. It's so frustrating.
I know, and that's when you realise, like, yeah, probably a good idea for the cast not to be on social media because, yeah, no one needs that.
No.
But returning to the positives, I was just wondering, obviously, you've done some amazing Lord of the Rings cosplays, and something that I'm really keen on once the show airs and kind of moving forward is, you know, spotlighting other people. Are there any of your fellow cosplayers, whether it's Rings of Power, Lord of the Rings accounts, that you'd kind of tell people to go and take a look at or anything like that?
Oh my gosh. Oh,
I know it's probably a big list.
Many. One that really comes to mind is Silhouette Cosplay. She does an incredible Cate Blanchett Galadriel. I'm like sure if you saw her picture, you'd be like, oh yeah, I've seen that because it's an incredible. Oh my gosh, now I'm on the spot. Oh, who are all of my friends? Kirsten the Golden. That's my friend. She does a lot of, like, OCs, and she's working on a Galadriel from the show, the one with, like, the blue on the white horse.
Yes.
She's making that.
Amazing.
Other Lord of the Rings creators.
It's all right.
Oh, my God. The stress. There's so many.
Worry. I realized that was a very, like, pop quiz type question.
It's like all of my friends do Lord of the Rings cosplays now. I'm like, I can't think of anyone's handle.
Do you know what? It's fine. Once I've edited the show down and everything, just send me a list of people and I'll like stick it in the show notes.
Great.
And like, that's what I always do. I'm just like when I forget stuff, I'm just like I'll put it in the show notes. Don't worry. But yeah, there's loads of great people doing things, and I can't wait to see more of it. In terms of what you've got going on, obviously we know about your cosplays, or at least if anyone didn't, which I can't believe it. How dare they? Talk to the people. I know you mentioned maps. Talk to people about what else you're doing in your time.
Oh, yeah, so I've got my shop is called In the Reads. I've got lots of, like, Lord of the Rings bookmarks and maps, and I'm currently working like a madwoman to get all of my costumes done for Dragon Con, which is in, 2 weeks now. So I'm, like, doing stuff for Dragon Con, which I'm hoping the OneRing.net will be at Dragon Con, so...
Wicked.
There's maybe going to be some fun stuff for that during the premiere. What else do I have going on? I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of just like making maps or making costumes all the time.
Absolutely. And I will say for the viewers, I'll link it. I'm sure you've got a picture of it somewhere. Lauren is sitting in front of the most incredible map of Middle-earth. I'm not jealous, by the way.
No?
As Lauren can see, my background equally Middle-earthy.
No, the ironing board is nice. It's nice.
I can't... Yeah. I was going to say I'm going to cut that out, but it's too good a detail, so that's going in the show. Yeah, listen, I'm moving house soon, and I'm going to try and get some more Tolkien stuff up.
No one is judging you.
Yeah, London flat shares, not known for their big wall space.
That's fair.
But, yeah, so that's all very exciting. And then one of the questions I kind of wanted to end on, and it's more of, I don't know where you'll want to go with this, but I think there's a lot of people who sit there and go, I want to creatively engage with the show or Lord of the Rings in general. I don't really know what to do, or maybe specifically, it's cosplay. For me, it was kind of I wanted to talk about it, so I made a Twitch account, and then I wanted to talk more about it, so I made a podcast, because it's an incredibly vain thing to do.
I've got a podcast too!
I know, look at us, just
we
two vain people.
We have too much to say.
I know. But for people who are maybe thinking, I really want to get into cosplay, but I'm very nervous about it, I don't have a lot of resources or whatever, what would be your advice to people who want to get in but are feeling a bit nervous about starting?
That's a very common thing. I think, we all feel that way when you first get into something. Again, like I said earlier, like, start with something that you love. Like, whether it's Lord of the Rings or whatever it is, just, like, pick something that you love. Pick, like, your favorite character. Maybe if you're just getting started, maybe pick their simplest outfit. You don't have to, like, do, the biggest showstopper piece in the world to start. There's a lot of options for, like, thrifting easier cosplays. Like, don't be, like, higher level people can get a little bit persnickety about, like, buying costumes when you start, or, like, buying pieces of costumes. Like, don't be afraid to, like, get the pants on Amazon and, like, thrift the shoes, and, like, it doesn't need to be, like, this totally screen accurate thing. Like, there's a lot of costumes that I am striving for, like, some level of screen accuracy, but, like, for my Thorin, it's like the pants were just, like, some linen pants that I had. You see, like, as I was looking so hard for references, there's, like, one promo picture where you can see, like, a 1/4 inch of his pants, and I was like, see, it's not worth, I'm not making pants. They're not important. So you kind of just gotta pick and choose your battles and, find accounts. And I also think it's important to do your own research when it comes to, like, starting projects, because I get a lot of people that will just, like, I'll be wearing my Thorin cosplay, and they'll be like, how'd you make that? And it's like, okay, well, again, not really a simple answer.
Yeah, it's like, well, I started making it and then I finished making it. So that's the answer to your question.
It's like people are like, how do you sew? And it's like, maybe just Google some things. Do a little YouTube research, figure out, and then if you have, like, more specific, if someone's like, how did you weather the scales on your Thorin? It's like, okay, I can help you out there, but not just like, how do you do that?
Yes.
So don't be afraid to, like, do a little bit of, like, a basics deep dive, and then, ask creators for, like, more specific help if you need it.
Yeah. Oh, well, that is a fantastic answer. And I wasn't asking for me, because I've never done cosplay, probably have no intention of doing it. But, okay, here's the little secret, is yesterday they announced that Círdan is going to be in Season 2, the famous elf who has the beard because he's so old. Now, I don't look very elvish. I do have slightly elvish ears.
Oh, you do? Oh my
gosh. I know. We've just done an ear reveal on the recording. I know that won't be for anyone else, but...
That's exciting.
I know. What a weird thing to have on a podcast. But I've always thought, I'd love to cosplay as an elf, but like, well... I don't think the beard is really going to sell it.
The beard.
Yeah, and I just think, hang on a second, there is now an opportunity in, like, a year's time when I first get to see Círdan. Who knows, maybe at the ripe old age of 28, 29, I'll be like, now's my time.
I think, honestly, I don't let things like that limit me when it comes to cosplay. Like I was saying, people got all... Not everyone, but, like, people got all butthurt that I didn't do the beard for Thorin. It's like, hey, this is my artistic interpretation. Like, I wanted to do a femme version of Thorin, and I did all the research on the females with beards, like female dwarves with beards, and Tolkien said in his later writings that he maybe took back that female dwarves had beards. So everyone can suck it, and you can do whatever you want, and you can be an elf with a beard, and you can do anything you want, because at the end of the day, it's your time and investment in, a costume, and you can have it look however you want.
And I would like to say to our listeners, don't let my nervousness and anxiety put you off from doing interesting and creative things. I just like sitting behind a microphone rather than having people take pictures of me wearing a costume, because that's just my brain.
Right.
Listen, Lauren, thank you so much for coming on the show. Tell the people where they can find you on social media and all your platforms.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm Lauren Does Cosplay on Instagram, Lauren Does Cosplay on TikTok, I think with periods in between the words, L Does Cosplay on Twitter, Lauren Does Cosplay on YouTube. I've got, like, some YouTube cosplay tutorials. If you search Lauren Does Cosplay,
we'll put it below. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we'll put all those links below for all the listeners. Once again, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I think if we can leave one message with the listeners, it's, if you're nervous about doing cosplay and nervous about doing your first cosplay, just remember, if you start tomorrow, one day you may be able to have an experience where you can't remember what Morfydd Clark says to you. So... Really,
it will be so special.
Exactly. An inspirational take-home message.
Yeah, what do they say? Like, you never start if you didn't try, or you didn't, whatever the phrase is. It'll never happen if you don't start.
I think I'll just cue the music out.
I'll just keep going.
Well, listeners, I'm sure you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. As we mentioned during the show, check the episode description for links to all of Lauren's work as well as to the other cosplayers she highlighted. Thank you once again to Lauren for coming on the show. She was an absolute delight to talk to, and hopefully we'll get another chance to have her back on the podcast once the show airs. As a quick note to end the show, I'm currently running a giveaway on my Twitter account for the new single edition of Lord of the Rings, with a tie-in cover from the Rings of Power. I'll link the tweet below, but all you have to do is leave a like and a comment about what you'd like to see from the show and what you're most excited about. So please do share that with any of your friends who might like a new exciting copy of the book. As always, I'd greatly appreciate if you could leave a rating or review on whichever podcast platform you use. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back tomorrow with more discussion of the latest news on the Daily Rings of Power podcast. Numarie.